developer, but I've put together, over the quite a few websites, I've learned more and more, but not quite enough to put together a module. And the subtitle, as I was sort of putting together some notes for what I want to talk about, is show what Drupal can do and has done for schools and in the academia. But then I thought, well, there's more to it than just the software. So that's why the subtitle is from modules to institutional culture, because I think there's a lot that goes on that actually has quite an impact on this. So to start with, here are a few of my of the websites I've put up in the last year and a half or so since I got started with Drupal. And none of them are sort of the sleek variety, if you will, specific actions. They're all about presenting. They're all sort of very basic, trying to get the job done with contract stuff without much modification, or with a few theming things, but not much more than that. The first one is actually an old site of mine that I put. It's on Bohemica, about things Czech, or people can learn about Czech language and culture. The blog, there's some exercises, there's a quizzes, a forum, and things like that. The second one is just a dream. I just own the domain. There's a basic Drupal website show on it, but this idea of sort of a social networking website for language learners called Local Start. And I've also just about the time that Drupal was getting started, I paid somebody to develop a system for designing language exercise and language materials online. And I've open sourced and I made that available at that domain. So if anybody wants that, help yourself. And in particular, if anybody wants to poke into a Drupal module, then help yourself all the more and help everybody. Because it does some very neat stuff that nothing else that I know does. And I have no resources to support it, but if anybody wants it. And there's a screencast as well that explains how it works. And then the next one is, last year I gave a talk about Drupal for education, for a university department. So that was the educational part, now the academic part. And that this is the research.edu.ueac UK, it's University of East Anglia. That's where I'm at. And this is basically a research environment for my department, which is quite large. And that has certain needs that I'll talk about in a minute. Another one is a quick website I just threw up. I was doing a research project, literature review. I needed a way of presenting it to a bunch of people, so rather than sending a bunch of emails, I put up a quick Drupal website, and I'll show you how that is. Another one I just did for another project, showed the decision makers, and a few more. The next one, the one is cadad.org, that actually is a little community where we organize a conference, and we're doing another one next year, and then we also started an ejournal, so that's kind of a bit more advanced. I'm a member of the Prague Linguistic Circle, and I run their website, so I started one, and using multilingual, they're trying to put everything out in 4 languages, and that's one that hasn't taken off quite yet. Another few ones. And then the last at the bottom, they're not Drupal sites, there are my two remaining WordPress sites. One of them is the philblog.ua, that's a collective blogging site I set up for the philosophy department. And I put it there as kind of an example of sometimes, even though Drupal would have been sort of ideal for it, but they're removing from Blogspot. I needed a quick way of getting in, and without having to support them at all. I said I was going to do a website, and I would never want to hear from you again. And the only way I could reliably do that is WordPress. And they did exactly what they wanted. It's not managing their website. Their main website is just doing the blogging part. And I was done with it. And the last one is Community Care. That's my own sort of academic blog for sort of linguistic things. But it's also WordPress, just because I have no need to move it to Drupal because I just don't. But one day I will. And there's loads of other websites, but they weren't that hard. They were not that easy to find. One of them is this Hui Talk, which is a great like a new project that just came out, a social networking website for language learners. So you can everybody can add their own vocabularies and share their list of words that they know, and then they can learn that way. And it's this little little social networking websites for language learning. So that's one that just came on recently. Then on the other side of things, the University of Calgary has moved their entire sort of university system, not quite all their faculties, but their university to Drupal. Another research, so that's on the other side of the sketch. On one hand, you have the social networking for language learning. On the other hand, you have an entire university being managed by Drupal or the web presence. And then on a smaller scale, is actually, I take a bit of credit for that side as well, because I think they chose Drupal partly on my recommendation. It's a education research project where they actually let researchers upload interviews, videos, and they use it for sort of collective, managing their project quite well. And that is actually not too far. It's a few hundred kilometers down south from here, so it's insane. But we have a collaboration with them on certain projects, and some projects. I think some of our researchers also are posting data to it. Here's a great little site that unfortunately is Drupal 4.7, and I have no idea if it ever, and it runs, it's Swahili coming up with a dictionary, a learner's dictionary of Swahili online. It seems to be pretty active and interesting. Then, we heard the talk about the NASA collab, the people who are behind the conference distro. And here's a puzzler. I had it on my list, and then I went and checked it again. It was one of the websites that actually got me started thinking about how to use Drupal for this sort of thing, sort of managing academic communities. Anthropology.net, and I went to them, and they're converted into WordPress now. So I don't know what happened. I'm going to have to try to investigate that a bit more. So, but there used to be a great Drupal site. I really liked it. I don't know what happened. Now, as I was looking at all these sites, and I've done some of them, I've discovered that there's a big gap in the way of Drupal, the audience of Drupal target. So on the one hand, Drupal is great for massive projects, MTV, Sony, the Warner Brothers, musicians, and Mother's Click was a great one that I found recently, Greenpeace, you name it. And it's great for small or smallish projects, like my own personal website, or this is an example of an academic website, just putting up, where there's one person, or just, a very small group of people where one person is kind of responsible for keeping the site going. But it isn't, at least, in my experience, isn't very good for some medium-sized projects, such as a university department. Not because it's bad at software, but because these institutions or organizations often aren't geared up for even the tiniest bit of support of a CMS-based website. So they're still used to the old model of somebody learning a bit of Dreamweaver or front page and putting up a few side pages, and then they ask the secretary to modify it once in a while. But they're not used to actually having to pay somebody to do security updates, manage database, manage server. Sometimes you need to repair a table in a database and things like that. And these organizations, like small private schools, language schools, or small public schools, or university departments, where the central university is not supporting, which is the case for most, then they're having a lot of trouble maintaining their Drupal. So Drupal, and it's not a Drupal problem, it's really a CMS, database-based CMS problem. There's a big gap. So that very often becomes a problem that some just things break and it's hard to get them fixed. So something to keep in mind, a lot of these problems are institutional. So what I want to do now is, by the way, interrupt me with questions or anything. Yes?
I don't think that's an institutional thing. I think institutions are coming up, realizing they do need a CMS, and as they're looking at other options, I would just counter that Drupal is a very reasonably priced option for what they need to do. But what they need to do is not what they used to do, and they're going to have to make a move one way or the other.
Yeah, you're almost saying the same thing with, yes, I'm not in disagreement with that, no. But the problem is that very often they're actually not realizing they need a CMS. Sometimes there's somebody like me who comes into an institution and says, you guys need a CMS. And they don't really realize that they have a need until somebody puts it up for them. And then you sort of come up with, in the old days, somebody puts up a department's website without just kind of telling anybody, and it was done. and just lasted forever. You know, it could be 10 years old, it was ugly, but it's there. But somebody like me, you know, comes to my department, I'm there for 2-3 years, I put up this website, I leave, and they're in the, you know, and there's, I don't know, somebody on the server, somebody, you know, upgrades the version of MySQL, and and they're dead. So, you know, so that's, so it is a bit of, so that's kind of the, often that's what happens. And of course, Drupal is great because then they can, you know, it's not that difficult to find somebody and pay somebody to hack into it and fix it. So I'm not saying that Drupal in itself is bad. It's better than any other, you know, than many other solutions, but it isn't quite addressing the institutional needs at the moment in their entirety. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, so as I said, I want to just kind of quickly talk about education separately and then academia separately, and then look at a few modules and what Drupal is doing, what else might be needed, and things like that. So here's the truth about education, right? There is no such thing as education. It's so incredibly complicated. So you've got the private sector, public sector, primary, secondary, higher education, further education, and then nobody knows, you know, which is higher, which is further. And then you have formal, non-formal, small scale, large scale, face-to-face, distance education. Then you have all these stakeholders, that's what we call them in education: students, teachers, school administrators, parents, employers, alumni, community. This is not an exhaustive list. Then you have materials that you are managing: textbooks, audiovisual stuff, interactive, quizzes, all that. Really, tests. I mean, the whole testing is a whole other field with its own, standards and markup languages and then ethics and all this other, so that's, and then you have all these processes in education. You got, of course, learning, even though that really should be last often, if you look at these things. Teaching, studying, not the same as learning. The memorization, projects, case studies, testing, examination, portfolio building, mentoring, socialization. So all of these things happen in education, and you need to, and when you look at this in their totality, you're thinking, but Drupal is great. This is exactly the right platform for education, right? But then, go back up one slide, and we're coming back to the institutional problems. Okay, so what are the problems that we need to solve within this whole sort of complex of interactions and everything? Well, so sometimes when you're like a little rural school, maybe, or or a private language school, you need to present your stuff. So a regular brochure kind of thing, piece of cake. Right? Then to the next level, you need to come up with what's called the VLE, the virtual learning environment, which will set assignments, create materials and tests, and allow students and teachers to communicate with others. You need to administer these courses that you run, students, classrooms. You need to do timetabling, maintain the privacy of students. That is a huge deal. I mean, you're sort of getting into legal waters that are skating on thin legal ice. And then you have these huge privacy walls, but then you need to involve others. So you're, at the same time you're tasked with maintaining privacy, on the other side you're breaking it at the same. You need to be sort of challenging at the same time. So you're, so not that easy. So what does? We should have a sticker. What would Drupal do? So what would Drupal do in faced with that? Well, first we have the DrupalEd distro, which is a great project. That is running and trying to, and if you look at the discussions that go on the DrupalEd distro page and the DrupalEd.org, that's where you get it from, is that you find that it is very difficult to actually identify a good set of needs that you should have one distro for, because you can imagine, just look at the list. But it is a very good platform, so I'm just going to show you quickly. If you put it up, and then this is what you get when you install Drupal distro. It's roughly the sort of thing you get. So you can get you can set up groups, a personal workspaces. You can set up some quizzes. You have a body list and all of these other things. There's the gradebook module is also on there, so you can set up a few of these things, so it kind of comes with a bit of, there's blogging, uses the bio module for creating user profiles and things like that. And it's quite nicely done. So if you're a small school and you want to get started, but it's rather small, I would say, that's the perfect way to start. Of course, unfortunately, distro you need to install Drupal, then dump the database, and then install the distro database, which isn't that much of a task, but if you're a small school, it may sound a bit daunting. So this is, I don't have time to sort of demo, and I'm not that familiar with all its in and outs, but that's one thing. The other one is the PHP Edu project. Somebody recently converted their old attempt into Drupal, and that actually does a bit more about on the side of courses and managing like departmental leads and things like that. So that there's the links on the Drupal side, but it's actually on this side. Then there's a bunch of independent modules. There's a quiz module, there's a gradebook module. There is some attempts at the Moodle integration. I'll talk about Moodle in a minute. And there's some old modules that, as is the way in Drupal, once we're there and now they're not. Now they're in 4.7. So there's the vocab, which is the one that's used by the Swahili project. It's an interesting, intriguing module. I've never used it myself, but that I looked at the Swahili, then question answer set that goes with it, flashcard that again goes with it. Seems like ideal things, but I haven't seen any activity on the module pages. And then there's some indirect ways that, of course, Drupal can help in obvious ways. There's body list, user points, Facebook integration, whatever happens there. So those are kind of on the social side of things, obvious social networking side of things. Then there's organic groups and node profile and bio. I'm just take a pick, whichever you want to use. I've used both. I'm not so much sure which one's better for what. And then of course the obvious CCKMVs, right? You can do so much stuff with CCKMVs on the database level that you just, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Access control. Unfortunately, access control is a bit of from the perspective of education, very often, access control in Drupal isn't quite ideal because you need to rely on contributed modules for, basically setting individual permissions for nodes, but that often conflicts with organic groups, so so it's not impossible, it's just difficult to do without any budget, which is, again, we're talking most of these things, unless you're University of Calgary, which most of them aren't, you're talking about a very small budget, so again, if it's not in country as it is, you're probably not going to get it done.
Can you start about competition and who else is in this space?
That's my next slide. And then, of course, taxonomy, a great thing in Drupal, in many ways, bizarrely underused, because there's so many things that can be on with taxonomy, and so many things built into it, but nothing takes care of it, like the hierarchies of taxonomies and the related related tags and all these things. I'm putting together a project proposal for a research project, and hopefully I can have some development funding in it, so I'm looking into that. And of course the book module that finally in Drupal 6 will do what you would expect the book module to do, maintain multiple books. Okay. Drupal's competition, right, in this particular space is the VLEs, the big VLEs. Blackboard, WebCP, now the same thing. That's the big commercial, tens of thousands of dollars, yearly licenses, Java, Oracle, those sorts of things. Inflexible, ugly. But, when you're a massive university, but what they do well is they know their space, and they know their standards, and they know how to sell all the privacy, all these things, and they're getting better. 3 years ago, it was awful. Now they actually have some of their community stuff. They're getting on board. It's still on the old clunky model, but it's not that bad if that's all you have. But again, that's for a large organization. So I think Drupal could get into that space, but and I'll talk about how I think that might happen. Then you have Moodle, A-Tutor, and I've talked about some of the attempts at integrating Drupal and Moodle. And so the DrupalEd distro group, actually that was one of its main aims. Turns out Moodle is not that well written, and it's not that easy to actually do it. Other than just authenticate and share user switches, not that difficult. So I haven't actually tried that, so that's something that might or might not happen. The DrupalEd distro is kind of trying to replace Moodle in some ways, and it's doing, I think, a reasonably good job, at least on the side of groups, but still, and I'll talk about some of the things that are still missing. Digication, I followed it up. That's a great company with a great idea. It's a Web 2.0 company that sells social networks to public schools in the U.S. And it's actually free for up to, I think, 500 or 1,000 users, and then it's paid for after that. And I think it's a wonderful idea. And again, Drupal should be in that space and be learning from that. But I'm saying Drupal, plus, we should be sort of looking at this stuff. Then I want to again give myself a plug. That's not a competition. That's why it's in quotes, because it's not a competition for Drupal. Because it's really only ever worked on one website, on the Bohemica, my site. It's like a bunch of check exercises, and I developed it because I wanted to have an interactive way of storing all the exercises. I've written a check textbook once and a co-written, so I just wanted to have it on the web, and I had that developed for that. And so but it is again, I mean, it is a great way of creating online interactive materials with a simple markup language that I haven't seen anywhere else. Because everywhere, and I'll talk about some of the shortcomings later again. So please, somebody who's competent and has the time and willingness to go and port it or something with it. The testing system, question mark, is one of the big ones. And I don't think we had any chance of ever getting into that space because it was just a huge business and it's specialized in there. So unless a company somewhere, a big testing company says, well, Drupal is great for this, we're going to put some work into it, we're not going to ever get into that. The quiz module is not for tests. That's really just for a pop quiz. And other CMSs, of course. I mean, there's schools that are using Joomla because it's a brochureware CMSs mostly. And then social networking in general. One of the I was really excited about the Facebook integration with Drupal because so many of students and now more and more academics are on Facebook. And one of the problems is that they don't want to go into it. Nobody wants to go into yet another social environment where they have to maybe it's another group of friends. That, so if there's a way of integrating, and if we don't hurry up in the education space, then we're never going to get in because the other social networks already take all the available attention, or all the friendliness in people will be taken up by these friends on Facebook, and we won't get in. And again, I'd like to research that a bit more because I think there's interesting things are happening at the school level. Okay. So where Drupal falls short? Well, so basically I gave you a list of all these modules, but none of them, or most of them, are comprehensive or mature enough that I could say, scrap Blackboard or even Moodle and move over to Drupal. So creation of interactive materials. The quiz module is unfortunately not up to, it's just really not very good at all. It's great for, I've used it for one little quiz on my site, and it just, it's fine for that, but it doesn't really do, it's not an educational tool, it's a fun, it's a glorified poll with some other stuff. There's no assignment workflow. The PHP Edu and the Gradebook module are doing some of that. I think there would be they don't feel solid enough to me. Mind you, I haven't really gone down and implemented it for a school, so maybe I'm being too harsh on them. But the way the few I poked around and I tried it out didn't feel quite solid enough to me at this stage, and also integrate together. But we're coming along. The DrupalEd distro group, they're doing great work. So I think that's coming along quite. The same goes for classroom management. Organic groups are great, but they're too generic for many things. There's again things are missing because the way that people are members of groups is different from the way people are members of classrooms, and there's lots of dynamics that go on, and that I personally have found difficult to use organic groups for to capture some of the groups, some of the natural groups that are in our academic department, for instance. I'll talk about that more later. And then the privacy assurances. I have basically told my department we're going to use Drupal for a lot of the back-end stuff, like keeping a list of academic visitors, but nothing that needs to be by law compliant with privacy requirements can get on it because, well, first, because the backend isn't encrypted, so anybody with a database password like me can get into anything. So that actually could be a big problem for for a school. But the thing that is really missing are mature Drupal shops that are dedicated to education. Well, there's Drupal, there's Funny Monkey. Those are those are the people who actually are running the DrupalEd distro, so they're doing great work. And I just found out about Palantir, like a recently converted design company that are doing education, museum stuff and research groups. And I just talked to you guys, you're doing some education research stuff as well. So maybe you can talk a bit more about what you're doing later. But I always thought, my original thought, as everybody said, well, we keep talking, Drupal needs to market itself more. We have these marketing groups but I actually don't believe that anymore. I think Drupal needs somebody like Lollapalooza in, what they did, MTV, Sony, just kind of keeps, Warner Brothers, just keeps growing in this massive way, right? Again, the same thing, civic actions. You have these, all of a sudden, all these huge organizations, Amnesty, Greenpeace, are getting on board with this. There isn't anything in this space that actually where there is enough of a sort of critical mass of installation, and where there's a company where we can go to Drupal company for a university website, for like an entire. My university, I'll talk about it more later. But the same goes for schools. If a school said, I want a Drupal website, there's nobody out there to sell it to them, would support for a reasonable sort of amount, and the way it's done in Drupal. And then there's a small big dilemma that I mentioned. That's how exactly what are the scales that this is ideal for. Okay. So let's move to this. So any comments before I move to the academia on this? Okay.
Well, just one comment. You sort of mentioned the DLEs, but I think what you haven't talked about at all is all the administrative needs. You mentioned some stuff like calendaring, scheduling, stuff.
Right.
I mean, that's also a huge part of running a school.
Yes.
All this scheduling stuff. And again, that's more where you compete against groupware or general scheduling stuff, online calendar stuff.
Although I found that schools usually don't do a very good job. They often have just some sort of custom software for timetabling. And they usually, so in many ways the events or sort of TCK and date calendar modules are pretty good, at least for my department, they're pretty good for what we need. But if you need to put it together a school timetable, there's nothing in Drupal. But then again, there really is nothing in the VLEs that does that well either. Because the VLEs they're really not designed for supporting the administration of the school on the sort of physical side of things, like classroom management. And so the session that was canceled just before this was kind of interesting. It was about a booking system. So so that could have been used. But you're absolutely right. But I will show you in a minute that actually Drupal is great for some of these things because of the smallness. But anything else before I move on to the other side of things? Okay. Well, the truth about academia. Well, there are the three things that we take into account. There's research. I come from the social science department, so I'll be sort of more looking at that. So you do surveys, interviews, experiments. You do thinking and talking about it, and then you do literature reviews and things like that. You research, you communicate about your research, and that actually. This is, there's great things. Basically, what this is all about, you're establishing networks of trust. You need to find out who you trust and why you should trust them, because otherwise science and academic, the knowledge and the scholarship would not work without trusting, because nobody can replicate everything. So that's what this is all about. So you publish things in books, journals, e-journals, websites. You do peer review. It's very nasty process sometimes. As I found out when I started running this e-journal, so I'm getting these peer reviews. Good Lord, somebody is not very charitable. So and then you do conferences like we're doing right now, and you do projects. And I'm not sure if there's other things I probably forgot. And then there's institutional logistics. So you have departments, you have research groups, you have institutes, then you do some teaching, you do supervise, your PhDs, and then you need to communicate about all of that to your funders, and also to your accreditation agencies, and you name it. Okay, So here's a paradox about academia that I just kind of realized recently, is that we owe the web, HTML, to an academic's desire to communicate about his research, right? That's how web got started. And, you know, even though I was just talking to somebody, I said, I think Gopher could easily be brought back for quite a bit of stuff that is on websites right now. But now that the internet is the web, right? There's, you know, no more Gopher, no more FTP other than, you know, for uploading stuff to the web. The academia is not using it, even though all the social networking, all these Web 2.0 is what academics do, right? The world of academia is nothing but a huge gossip cauldron that out of which sometimes emerges useful stuff, and very often follows, you know, fallacies. So, but academics are still in the world of static HTML, and it goes back again to the social and institutional backings that they have or very often don't have. I know a very prominent professor in the field of education who pays somebody in Hong Kong just because he's traveled there, not because he's outsourcing. So update once every 6 months, he sends this woman his articles, you know, his latest publications. She puts them up onto, you know, front page or something. And he's one of the progressive ones. You know, so, and his website actually looks good. I mean, you know, it's not like just one giant UL, you know, unordered list of things that you often find, and with a big picture on top, you know, like takes half the page of the academic blog or something. So it's HTML and email. That's what academics use. Well, this is very important because they have a focus of attention. So when an academic turns on their computer when they come to their office or when they wake up or however they do it, they get their email. If it's not in their email, it doesn't exist. So, you know, so to convince them that email actually isn't good for academics is a bit of a chore. And then they go to the web and download their PDF or whatever, read the paper, print it out, usually print it out, comment on it, have their secretary, you know, type up the comments and send it out. So there's a paradox. But here are the problems that they need to be solved. So organizing conferences is one, and we know that we're solving that right now. Sharing bibliographies and publications, again, I'll show you how that can be done. Anonymously peer review submissions, share their writing, annotate, build communities. You need to sort of deal with their focus fragmentation. That's an important thing I found because you can have the greatest website. If your users don't use it because they never think to go to it, then it's no good. User resistance and then multi-institutional collaboration is one big thing that happens. I've run into it recently. Is that nobody wants the other. You know, there's 4 or 5 institutions working on a research project. None of them want the other one to close the website, right? But so they would like to have 5 websites, but have the same information on them, or have a joint website somewhere and just link it in different ways. And I'm often asked when I do some of these websites, and they say, "Well, can we integrate it with our homepage or something?" And I say, "Well, how?" And that means put a link somewhere. So the requirements of integration is really just, you know, put a link somewhere, and the answer to that is inevitably always yes. But of course we want more from that. You know, we want more than that, and Drupal can offer more than that. So I spend a lot of my time convincing people that they have needs that they haven't actually perceived. So I'll train perception as well. So what are the key modules? And the one module, you know, the sort of the king to rule them all is the Biblio module. So if you want to ever convince an academic department they should run, they should get to Drupal, show them the Biblio module. All that does is basically it runs bibliographies and presents them and shares them online. Now, there are 2 ways academics maintain their bibliography list. One is they have a giant Word file with citations that they cut and copy and paste out of into their publications. It's a mess. If you ever try to edit a journal or a volume with people sending you this stuff, it's a nightmare. The progressive ones are using software called EndNote or RefWorks, and there's a bunch of them, but they also basically do, so this is mine, and it has Jesus Christ, what is it? Like 1,600 references, but, and not all, no, it's not stuff for projects as well. So, EndNote is good. It's a massive ripoff. It's not, well, it does the job, but it's not actually very good. So, the nice thing is it integrates beautifully with Word, so you can just type in and put your references and generate your references. So it would take a month at the end of writing up a thesis to get together your bibliography. Now, when I finish an article, I click a button, and I have, 10 seconds later, I have my bibliography. So that's great. But I am the only person who has that bibliography. So, for instance, what was that? So, for instance, I just finished a literature review, and I put up a little website. It used to be themed better, but I just moved it to a different server and haven't moved some of the other stuff. And I needed my job. I was actually paid to do to the library and research stuff about the evaluation of university teaching. And the way that I had done it before was just, email people a Word file. And then I had 10 other people, 5 people who needed to read my message. But now I could just quickly put up a Drupal website, export EndNote into XML, which it does, and import it into here, which it also does. And now I can share, let's say how many, 223 references that I came up with from this project, like that. And then I can, put up in my project notes, and I have links to different categories. I can sort it by author, sort it by keyword, do all of these things. It was actually one of my few contributions to Drupal. I came up with a different display theme where you can see the keywords on here as well. So if anybody's using, it's actually somewhere in it's not part of the Biblio, but it's somewhere on there. I have a few things that kind of show it up differently, because it's much easier than if you can, I just want to see these things that have quality, they're tagged with quality in some way. Because I moved the server literally 2 days ago, so and I haven't tested it yet. Anyway, so that might work. That usually works. So that is the king of academic modules, because it saves so much time. Of course, if you have a whole department, this is the departmental website I showed you, I put together. There used to be a bibliography link up there, but it isn't anymore, because we haven't been able to get everybody's bibliographies in there, because there's so many, such a hard task to get it together from Word. But once you have it together in a database, then you can do this stuff. So that's the one. And then there are 2 associated library modules if you want to interface with libraries, and you know what that means. They're good. I haven't used them because I don't know what they. I know what that means, but I don't have the need. So that's all I'm going to say about it. There's the ejournal module that has finally been semi-ported to Drupal 5, and it's not quite ready. So I ended up running our ejournal just through CCK and views. And we only publish twice a year, so that's fine, so I can always create a new view for each issue. But ideally, I would have wanted to have an ejournal which has lots of issue control. You can schedule releases, publications, and there's lots of stuff it can do. It just doesn't quite do it well enough for an academic. And the one thing it doesn't do yet is the anonymous peer review process. So you need to get the peer review done elsewhere. And because that's by email, basically. And because that's what we have to do, we just didn't really have a need for it yet. Footnotes is another one that's good because it integrates with Biblio, so you can get your footnotes automatically generated. Table of contents is a great module because it creates a little clickable list from your H2 level headings. Then you got the event calendar, sign up, schedule. Everybody knows about that. And then there's the conference organization. And there's some new work being done on Conference Distro, and I've just talked to people, and I'm going to try to give them some feedback from the academic side. But we saw how it was done for this conference, and that's pretty good. It's much better than most conferences, but there's still some ways to go, particularly if you want to do multiple conferences on a single site, which is the case of one of my sites. we're trying to put together a community that does a conference every 2 years, and we're going to have a record of each conference afterwards and kind of keep going. So that it's not quite ready for that yet. Then you have the event. There's a similar entries module that I'd like, but I'm going to talk about it. And then there's all these other modules, you know, CCK views. Let me give you a great example. My university purchased Palopoly, a commercial CMS, brochureware basically for large corporations. And, well, anyway, you can imagine. But one thing that my department did was to keep track of lots of research projects, because we're mostly funded, or most of the work goes through projects that are getting grants, whatever it is. So all I did, I created CCK views, a simple database with a simple, I didn't even use fast search or anything, simple search, filtering, which to anybody else looks like a search. And all of a sudden, the people at my department can say, well, what was happening between 1999 and 2001? A project that were in excess of 5,000 pounds or something like that. I mean, I don't think I have the money there. But you can search the site. The same, 2 years ago, somebody asked, we should have a list of theses. Well, we had one in Word, and luckily in a table, so I just converted the table into a CSV, imported it. The import module is great, by the way. And then now we have a database, and I'm going to fix the database, but database of theses published at our, defended, completed at our department, where we can search by the title, by description. I don't know, I think the CMS we paid, the university would cost $50 grand to get this done. Would take, I did that in an after, well, not an after, you know how long that takes to do something like that. Nothing. And our IT department couldn't handle that in the CMS that they purchased, right? So on a back end, and I have another one on the back end, which is a database of visitors to our department. So all of a sudden we can manage databases of stuff that we could never do before. So Drupal is all of a sudden, all is done. That's a great website for our department. And then we have organic groups, and that's where it sort of falls short a little bit, because, that's where I talked about last year about the needs of the department. We're surrounded with a problem of people are members of research groups, but membership in an organic group that is of that research group isn't the same as membership in that group, because they want people to collaborate in that group, who are members of that group, but who they want to have access to the organic group, if you see what I mean. And I see you don't, so if you don't, what are the chances that you just will, right? So we have a problem here. The networks that academics enter into are very complex, and the body list, I cannot push the body list module because it's beneath them, but because it just doesn't quite capture the complexity of the academic world. So it's not quite there yet. The wiki module I haven't used, but the wiki is a big buzzword in the academic community, but I'm not sure how useful it is. The book, hopefully, I'm using the file browser module for the site because I'm sharing lots of PDFs and stuff like that. My site, I have great hopes for, because to get over that focus fragmentation that academics have. Right, well, anybody really has. So if I can give them a reason to set the department site as their homepage with my site, then hopefully they'll be using the rest of the site as well. So I have hopes for it, but unfortunately I haven't been able to upgrade my department site from 4.7 yet, because I use an old CCK links field, and I can't get the database fixed yet. Anyway. So, but Drupal could do so much more, and I have no idea how and whether it will happen. Collaborative writing project. It's almost there, but not quite. It'll be great. And partly because it doesn't manage ownership of nodes the way that we need. So because having just one author of a node is a problem. I have in my project database, I have a problem because I have one author of the node. But there were multiple people working on that project, and I would like all of them to have edit privileges for that node, for their project node, but I can't. unless I put in an access module that will break organic groups. And then something that was meant to be private in an organic group will become public as has happened to me. And so I'm not doing it. So all of a sudden you start running into this sort of problem. WYSIWYG integration, we all know, is something that just needs to happen one way or another. I'm not saying for core, but I'm just somehow so that it actually is a bit, not as much of a nightmare. I had high hopes for OG to list. It's not there so that I, with my technical level and resources, which are nil, can implement. But again, email, the more I can have people communicate with the website by email and the website communicate with them by email, the more chance I have of implementing a successful academic website. And there's some ethical issues with this because also we sometimes want to collaborate with researchers in the in the South or in the sort of developing world, whatever you want to call it, who don't have, email is all they have, or just email is all that their bandwidth allows. So if you can allow them to email to us, and I know there are modules for it, they add them I just don't have the resources to implement them. And so if there was an easier way to do it, that would be great, yes.
How do you find the organic groups with set to fire off emails anytime there's a post to the group in terms of keeping people connected to the tool they're using?
Well, we're haven't quite progressed that far. So, but my experience with organic groups on Drupal, on the Drupal group side, is mixed. Partly because sometimes because of the groups cross-posting, and sometimes you just get lots of emails on topics you're not that interested in. And if you get too many emails, then of course you're swamped, and I just keep deleting stuff that I normally might be interested in. So, but that's I'm not saying it's a Drupal fault. I'm just saying this just becomes a problem to manage that successfully.
I mean, that's not a Drupal issue. That's a communications infrastructure issue. Are you in the group or not?
Yeah.
Do you want to get a communications in the group?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to solve that.
I'm not blaming organic groups for that, but it just becomes an issue. Yahoo groups, I'm on a lot of Yahoo groups list, and I don't have that much of an issue with that. So I think the other thing with organic groups is where it falls short for me. I'm using it as kind of a homepage for like a research group, and it's not very friendly for that. It doesn't quite have the layout control. So that there's something is missing there. So it's still not quite a replacement for Yahoo groups. If they were, it would be great. So. And again, what we need is a dedicated company that does this, and there are a few, but need to get the ball rolling. And I think that's okay. Competition, check out Kanapia. It's great. Social bookmarking for academics. Does export into EndNote. Therefore, that's and it's great. It's like delicious for academics. Perfect. SiteUlite, Sakai project is the other CMS that was developed as a virtual research environment. A good place to go, but I don't know much about it. Some people at our university are using it. Brochureware CMSs and Blackboard and Moodle are other competitors in this space. There's nothing quite right out there yet. And Drupal has the promise of being just right, but it's not quite. Okay, conclusions. I've said the conclusions all along, so I'm not going to bother with them. Do we have any time for discussion? Sorry.
Slideshow on the net.
Well, it's not there yet, but it will be eventually. And I will put it up on SlideShare, and then I'm going to sync it with the audio that I'm recording, so that will be available. So, discussion. Any sites you'd like to mention that I left out, projects you're working on, modules that I didn't mention, other problems that we need to solve, other suggestions, ideas, disagreements. We have about 8 minutes, I think.
Speaking of somebody who's used Moodle, Blackboard, and Drupal for a variety of different things, my students have to use Blackboard as part of the university requirement. They don't use Blackboard at all. If you put assignments on there, they ignore them. If you email them, they ignore it. I went onto Facebook, and all my students asked to be my friend. And then sent them a group for the course, and they all loved that. So I think a really key thing is making, from a student's point of view, making it attractive, but not trying to make them, like you said, join another social networking or something. If you can integrate it into something that the students are
there's great reasons for them to use it, except there's one of the selling points why I sold my department on this website. I said, well, now everybody can finally update their own profile. They don't have to send it to the secretary and have it updated a month later when she has time. Well, and I knew, as I was saying, I knew what a fool I'm being. Of course, half the people are still sending it by email to the secretary, and then she has to do it a month later. But, so we're just going to have to wait. And part of it is the user-friendliness isn't quite where I would like it to be. The panels thought that, I don't know if anybody went to the panels to talk, and there's the spontaneous plot that broke out in the middle of it. I felt it, because that was, that sort of interface, all of a sudden I can do my forms much more user-friendly and all of these things. So I'm hoping that, again, with every, further step, we're getting there, even on that. But I agree. I mean, when I had one way of using this, the other thing that I'd like to do, I'm hoping, is use it for actually during a conference, when you have some sort of like Barcamp style, or sort of it's called sometimes open space model of conferencing. But actually, people would use the Drupal website to collaborate during the conference, put up stuff during the conference, and but we're not even quite doing it here yet. So again, there's a ways to go. And I've used my TUIT system. I've used when I taught Czech in Glasgow. I use it with my students in class for testing. I actually did tests with it in the classroom. And then I ran into the problems that I had them listen to an audio file. They couldn't switch between the audio file and the browser. That was 2 years ago. But so you sort of run into lots of sort of competence problems that you don't even think exist. But there you go. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I would like to add to that comment. I think you've got a really good point there. I mean, you sort of need to work with the tools that they know already. And for the sort of teaching staff, I think the route is really email, that they as you said, that they can post content by email to the site, and that the site emails them back, things like that. And I don't know, Facebook also. But the other thing is, I mean, I'm in a similar situation. I work part-time at the university, one part of the university. I'm also looking at Drupal to implement the intranet, but I also have to use Moodle, but I haven't really figured out. It's probably going to have to run alongside. But one big thing, I think, is if you want to build up a community at the university, you need to offer them something that's really practical use to them as an incentive. So there needs to be stuff, just if it makes their life easier, if there's the organizational aspect they have to deal with them, but if those things are easy for them, that will win you over whatever platform, I think.
I sort of agree, but there's one more thing that's important for usability and that's why I mentioned my site, daily use. Because it is easy already. I mean, these are people, these are smart people. It's easy already. But actually, sometimes when I go back to a site I haven't visited for a while and I have a different setup, it takes me a while to find what I'm doing. So if I don't know that I want to do something, so for instance, blogging, right? I mentioned the site Mother's Click. I went to it. It's a great, really well-designed site because it's all the things you can do are right in your face. And I wish I had the resources to design a site like that because you don't need to think about it. Because for me, for us in this room, if we know that we want to do something, we'll find a way to do it on the website. But very often, we're sort of trying to, at the same time, teach the users to use a new website, new system, and teach them how to use it. So teach them what they want to do and how to do it. So I think we sort of need to make that a lot easier in that way, just by giving reasons to visit the site regularly. So I'm trying to do I'm trying to do this with the events listings, which is one thing I didn't mention. But but I also need to teach them how to use RSS readers. So all of these things, and luckily enough, lots of academic journals are now publishing their journals in RSS. So that will be on the website. So another reason to go visit it. So so it will take a while because we're sort of trying to do two things. We're telling people they have a need and fulfilling the need at the same time, as opposed to them coming to us with a need and we're fulfilling it. So we're sort of in the forefront, in the evangelist role as well. And so often we're sort of creating our own problems because I could have I was hired to do a website, could have done it much more easily. Nobody would have known any better, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Any other?
For example, we have that directory something of students and teachers.
Well, ours is supposed to be research. This is just a research part of the website. So it doesn't have, but for instance, our, this was very popular, a listing of our staff, where you could select people by group, but also do like a little, just nice little views thing so you can see everybody's face. But just a simple thing like that, and people like it. Regular sort of this node profile and all of that. So it's still rough around the edges, but it does the trick. It's much better work done. I've not even going to show you what it worked before. And we sort of semi-launched it only, so it's hasn't been around for long enough to sort of say exactly what it was. But already I can definitely share some of the experiences that are very predictable. And all along I knew we would have these problems, but all along I knew that I just couldn't help myself but push along. Any other comments? Is anybody else doing anything? You guys are doing something interesting.
Yeah. Well, we have a system that basically we work with researchers in the university, and we do categorization of all of their assets. We categorize the users, the type of research they do. We call it research management system that we provide to the university. Set up all the research. Lab researchers come in and log the materials they use, and it's used a lot by the compliance department in the university to track and make sure it's following all the correct rules. Integrate with the system into training and integration. So it's all based on, actually a lot of some of like your research projects area here is
And because check out the Camus.net site. That's really kind of interesting within the social sciences. And because all of this is natural stuff, and that's what academics already do. It's being greatly enhanced by this. It's just not quite there. I'm putting told a few people is I'm putting together a proposal for a project for an ethnography of the campus, but I want to use Drupal as kind of during the research and later on as kind of a platform for doing some of these things and social networking if the project gets funded. And so I want to actually build in a proper development budget into the proper by standards of these projects, a budget into that I could have some stuff developed. And I'm hoping that might serve. If that gets through and happens the way I want it, it might serve the my use. Oh, I forgot one more thing. If anybody's ever looked at discussions around GPL3, they developed an amazing system for commenting on text. And so basically all you do is all JavaScript or something. Maybe not even JavaScript, but you basically highlight a bit of text. It's inline editing, so you're not opening anything. Highlight a bit of text, start typing, and your comments appear. And then you search different colors, show you how many people commenting on different portions of the text. Please, would somebody implement that in Drupal? It's so beautiful. And there's another one, I think, Python, or Django has a UI for it, some sort of a library for it, and the Yahoo UI also has a library for it. So all of this is available open source, or the code is open for that. So if anybody ever wants to do some really really good karma, that would be the thing for Drupal. It looks beautiful. And it's very functional as well.
Can I ask how many people in the room are involved in education? Right.
I was going to ask the same question. For us, we should actually get to know each other.
Yeah.
Is there like a community or?
Yes.
I know there's more than good.
Okay. Well, there are 3 groups on Drupal groups at the moment, and I've already one is the DrupalEd distro group. Then there is the research and academia group, and it's all on the slide. And then there's the language learning communities group. And I started the last two I started, the research and academia and the language learning communities, I started that. And I put up on the research and academia site group, I put up a post, please let's share what everybody's done, and there were about 3 responses so far. So that would be a great way to start, just to get the company's website on. And I also started a wiki, or a listing of modules that are useful for this and things like that. And I will also post this presentation in there. So that would be a great way to go. The DrupalEd distro group is a little more focused on just the distro, but people are discussing more general things as well. And the language learning community is I just put up a few announcements of things that I've done, but nothing is going on there. So if anybody's interested, everybody's interested. If anybody's interested, join those groups and let's get some discussion going.
Yes, notice you had a slide up there for the open academic website. I think guys talking about doing something with Drupal.
Yes, and ELG as well. I forgot to mention ELG. Yes, I'm not sure. It's been the Funny Monkey people are involved in it, and I'm not quite up to speed on what they're doing. I think their dreams of sort of integrating all. They had a plan of integrating ELG, Drupal, and Moodle, and the latest that I saw on some of the postings was that their code bases and approaches, they're all PHP, but the code standards are so different that it's really hard to do other than just basic authentication sharing and stuff like that.
Just mention, you say that it is needing a company now, I've been thinking about that for a long time. You say the budget in academia, meaning it's a small budget, especially in Spain. If you address all the state-owned academic work by system, they will pay you little, late, and never. And being a small company, you can do it.
That's a good point. In a way, something like that would have to go along the lines of a distro, crank them out a lot as cheap ones. But for instance, I was approached to a website for a collaborative project with China and the University of Lancaster, and they went another way. But it just turns out they really don't have the vision. So in a way, you're just going to need to get one good site out there and show them. One project that could be so easy is universities. What happens at universities all the time, here's an idea for a company, take it and do it, please, is that universities are federations of small, tiny sort of entities, and they think of them as corporations. They're not. And what they need is basically their departments to provide some sort of hosting of the sort that Bright are doing or something. And when an academic often they're organizing a conference, they should be able to come to their IT department and say, I'm doing a conference, they push a button, and a Drupal install, a Drupal site pops up, and they have a conference. I'm doing a project with another university. We have a reading group. Push a button. Right now they're trying to do, they're sort of collaborating together with Blackboard, and it's awful because of the privacy stuff. It's closed, nobody else can get to it. These ways, this ideal project. Or my department of philosophy, they want to blog, they go to the IT department, push a button, you have a collaborative blogging website. And so that sort of stuff, if somebody could just can slowly push it out, and of course these solutions don't have to be too expensive because the infrastructure is mostly there. So I don't know. I'm just saying it, and I fully agree. I'm not at all disputing it. It's a problem. But if there was somebody who could sort of get the connection, slowly build up the juice, and maybe make some more money, subsidize it with some other project. There is a lot of money in education. So one way would be for somebody associated with an academic department already, and actually put in grants for these things, and then spin it off into something somehow. It is not easy. I'm just saying, but I think it will take something like that for it to get, because what Blackboard are doing, they're making millions and millions of whatever they're making, and they're selling it. It's not a piece of junk, but it certainly is locking these institutions into something that is flexible. It's always a few years behind standards. It's not, I really dislike Blackboard, but it does the job if I needed to quickly. So. So it can be done. You can make lots of money in education. You just have to sort of know how to do it. And I'm not saying I know, but I'm just so it can be done. So let's find a space, then I'd be more than happy to sort of share any ideas, and let's do it in the Drupal research group and educational groups, and let's just do it. Okay, well, thank you.
I'm just going to put a plug in here. I brought some Ubuntu CDs, so this is, if you want to try it out.
I have a spare card with on the website.
So yeah, this is a distribution of Ubuntu for schools. So help yourself. Right.